Hi YouTubers, I was on the internet and I found it very difficult to find a video or instructions on how to disassemble and reassemble a Dyson Cyclone. What basically happened was these cyclones you're not supposed to put in water or not supposed to rinse in water, and my son in his great wisdom did, and what ended up happening was the Cyclone, even after we let it dry for 48 hours, when placed back into the vacuum, the vacuum emitted a very hideous odor. So I did already disassemble this Cyclone, and I have already disinfected it with alcohol, and there's no further odor emanating from the Cyclone itself, and I thought I would reassemble it in front of the camera so that everyone gets an idea of the assembly or reassembly process. What you basically need is two tools. The first is a screwdriver, and the screwdriver should have something that extends outward, and this one does, so I can keep it long and tighten it up. This is a T15 head, and the other tool you need is something thin and plasticky. The reason why is this is required for a piece that I'll tell you about later on, and I just happen to use an envelope opener, but you can use anything else that's strong but plastic and thin. Okay, so on to the removal. Everyone knows that there's this canister that we normally dump out. There's no screws on here, so I'm being extra gentle in removing it. Okay, so this canister has already been cleaned out, and now I'm going to put that aside, and we're going to focus on the Cyclone itself. As you can see, it's already been dismantled, so I'm going to take it piece by piece off. A little bit of tightness due to the friction fit. Okay, so this piece here comes apart, and there's this this gasket, which I actually used a soft bristle toothbrush to clean, because this was very smelly, along with this gasket here. So basically what ends up happening is this piece goes on to the top red piece, but what you have to be aware of is that this notch here has to suit this notch. So that's all pretty simple and straightforward, because you know that it won't fit in any other way. There is a possibility of being able to shift this gasket, but again, this notch here should follow that notch there, and you just push the gasket in place. Now, there is a possibility that you could put the gasket in the other way, but note that the depressions, these depressions are facing outward, they're not facing inward. So my suggestion is just watch out for those, and you'll be correct in the placement of the gasket. Okay. And so once you've placed the gasket in properly, be gentle with it, and also when you're washing it, be gentle with it. Don't use something too abrasive. And use your nose to tell you when it's dry, and let it dry thoroughly. Okay, so basically now the top part should look like this. After the top part is on, you take the other piece, and you see this red piece there, that red piece goes through that notch area. And these areas here, these prominent areas here, are the ones that made the imprint on the gasket. So that's how you can tell. These two white pieces fit into the white holes here. So I'm going to put it together now. And there you go. Okay. Now, at this stage, you can put the screws in, and these are the long screws that came in, and these are the T15s. Do not use the short screws because they won't fit properly. Now, some people might be tempted to just put the screws in at this stage, but that's actually incorrect. You want to put the screws in after this white piece has already been put in. But before I do that, I'm just going to warn everyone here that this gasket, it comes out, and what you need to be aware of this gasket is that this notch here is wider than all the other ones. And that's how you would fit it in. Don't make the mistake of moving that gasket to another notch and then trying to fit the smaller notches into that one. Okay? So it takes a little bit of, I guess, working at it to get the gasket in place. One warning that I will make to all YouTubers: do not wash this gasket with detergent, like dishwasher detergent, because you will remove a lot of the powdery residue that's on it, and that powdery residue actually protects the gasket, and you want to keep those oils in place. As you can see, this has been thoroughly cleaned and with a toothbrush and with an alcoholic wipe step, and that is placing the white portion into the top piece. Now you'll note that there's holes on the bottom portion and there's holes onto this white piece as well. So we just make sure that they're fitted in properly. And at this stage, you can start putting in the screws. And this is where the long screwdriver comes in handy, like I said. And I typically do it in a star pattern, and that prevents you from over tightening one end or misaligning it. Okay. So I'm just going to screw it in off camera. Okay, I'm back. I put in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 T15 screws. And one thing that I would strongly recommend is when you use a screwdriver to torque in the screws, make sure it's fairly slender. And what I tend to do is just use my fingers and hold onto the screwdriver so I don't over torque it. This is plastic, so you don't want to over torque it and damage the part. Okay, so this part is now solid, as you can tell. This piece here has gone in, and now it does activate. This gasket here is solidly on. Now this piece here has a gasket on it, and again you have to remember that this larger opening has to meet up with this larger opening on the plastic. That's how you would make sure that it's properly placed on this area. Otherwise, you're going to have difficulties in reassembling it. Okay, again, we use a toothbrush to clean this thoroughly and let it dry thoroughly. There's only one way that it will fit in, and that is on top of this, and making sure that the wider connector meets up with the wider opening on the head here. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to press it closed. And one interesting tidbit for everyone is when I was first disassembling this, I thought that this piece was integral with the top piece, and that's why I used a really long screwdriver to go through here rather than pulling it off first and then finding it easier to access. But you don't need to make that same mistake now. That's how it looks now, okay? And it's in pretty solid. Now I'll put this aside. I'm going to move over to the other piece. Now this piece covers this piece, the top piece, but this is the area where I use the small plastic bit to remove it. You see these tabs here? They mate in with these tabs on this other piece, and this basically filters the dust that's going into the Cyclone. And it's a fairly pliable plastic, as you can see, and that's why when you use a piece of plastic in between, you're able to remove it. So in order to assemble this, it's just okay, so I want to make sure that they're all lined up, and they're not. So again, the largest notch is only in one area, and that's how you would make sure that it's lined up properly. So you got here, 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 and here. Okay, so I'm just going to push it in. You hear that click? Okay, and I suggest use a very thin piece of plastic when you're trying to open it, because it does slightly discolor the plastic, and there's a danger of it breaking if the plastic is too thick that you're using to open it up with. Okay, now that's one solid piece. Now what ends up happening is this goes on top of the top piece that we've already created, and it just screws in with the remaining screws that we have. And the only thing you have to be worried about is that this notch right here is properly situated. Let's see where this goes here. I think it goes like this, but I'm not 100% sure. I just noticed that the gasket is not as tight as it could be. Okay, so I'm just going to do a dry fit to make sure that I'm not screwing this on incorrectly. Okay, so my initial thought was that it did mate up with this notch here, and that is correct. I did do a dry fit off camera. I didn't want to waste anyone's time. And now just the remaining screws I'm going to put in. I'm just going to put them in loose for now. And then I'll use a crosswise pattern to torque them in. And again, I'm going to use just my two fingers when I'm torquing it in to avoid any problems of over torquing. As you can tell, I'm just using my fingers. Okay, I screwed in the screws and just did that off camera to save everyone some time. And I'm putting the canister on. Okay. Just a little bit of tightness here from the gasket. There we go. Okay, now the canister is solid. I'm just going to test it to make sure that it opens up. And it does. And there we go. This is your Dyson DC32. It was wet. It smelled. We've disassembled it, reassembled it, and now it's ready to be put into the vacuum. And as just an added note, we did also rinse the filter so that there's no added odor from there. Okay, we're done.